So today, I'm going to talk to you guys about how we move towards a digital government blueprint. Right? A quick breakdown of today's presentation. We'll first start off talking about maturity levels. We'll then discuss the core principles of a digital blueprint for government. And then we'll also look into why there's a need, what's driving the need for digital government nowadays. Then we talk about some of the prerequisites that we need to have in place prior to embarking on a digitization journey for government. And then we'll get into the slightly more technical stuff around the foundations of the platform. We'll discuss a sample landscape and a very high-level implementation plan before we look at sustainable development goals, and we wrap up with Q&A. What we talk about in terms of maturity levels is how we move from a traditional government model, which is siloed, it's slow, and it doesn't meet our needs or expectations as citizens. We're trying to move from that to a government that's more efficient, that's citizen-centric, and it's more transparent. Right, so level one would be your government departments that are still paper-based. There may be Excel and Access behind the scenes, but it's predominantly a paper-based workflow that's used. And as citizens, we need with government face-to-face. So we have to visit a government office to get what we need done. The information that's collected through this process is not shared. It remains within that agency. One step up from that would be when you have basic digitization, standalone systems, right? Each department would have its own digitization roadmap, which it runs based on resources that it allocates, right? From a citizen's perspective, for every department that has digitized in this way, we'll need a new set of credentials. We'll have to keep providing the government entities with the same data over and over again as nothing is shared. I think Sri Lanka would fall into this category, right? A lot of you are from Sri Lanka. So the DMV, for instance, has a number of use cases that have been digitized today, but that information isn't shared outside the DMV, right? Level 3 would be where some departments are integrated and they cater to use cases which require information to be shared by a number of different agencies. From a citizen's perspective, that means there is one user account to access all those capabilities, and things are a bit easier. Services are available online. They are available 24/7. You can access them from anywhere on any device. Right? Level 4, on the other hand, is more mature in the sense that there's an entire platform, a system, to allow government agencies to share information with each other, obviously with citizens' consent. The decision-making in these environments is based on the data and the metadata that's produced by these platforms. Citizens will only need to provide data once, and that will be shared across agencies as long as the citizen provides consent to share that information. The most mature level of digitization would be when government services are predictive. Machine learning and AI start playing a part. Think about South Korea, for instance, where your interaction with the government is through the metaverse and an avatar. Right? It's no longer visiting a government office and filling out a form. It's very different to that. So next up, let's talk about the blueprint, right? What the blueprint provides is a strategic direction and a number of foundation principles which we need to adhere to when we are digitizing these government services. It takes a holistic view of the problem, and it's not limited to an individual digital project. Some of the core principles that you need to keep in mind when you go down this path is things like user centricity, where we need to design services based on what users need. Users in this case could be citizens. They could be internal users who use the system day in, day out. The focus should be on ease of use. As I said earlier, data-driven decisions will be something else that we have to keep in mind when we're designing this platform. We need to leverage data that's produced by these platforms when it comes to decisions on policy, on service improvements, and on resource allocation. The services that we expose need to be seamless and integrated, right? As a citizen, when I'm interacting with the government, I don't want to know which agency I'm interacting with. I just want to complete a use case, complete a transaction, and move on. And what that's essentially doing is breaking down those departmental boundaries and focusing on simplicity. The platform has to be secure, and it has to be trustworthy. We need to protect the citizens' data while making sure the platform is reliable and running 24/7. Auditability and consent also play a role in this. The platform we design needs to be adaptable. We don't know from a technology perspective what's coming up in 3 years, what's coming up in 5 years. But if there are technologies that would add value to a platform like this, we need to be able to adopt them easily. So that has to go into the design decisions that we make today. So what's driving this need to digitize governments globally, right? As citizens, we expect a lot more from our governments now. We live in a digital world, and we want that convenience and accessibility to be reflected in the public services that are offered to us, right? When it comes to watching a movie, no one goes to rent a video from a video store anymore. You sit in front of your TV, you launch Netflix, you select what you want to watch, and you start watching it. Why can't public services be like this? The technology we need to enable that is here today. Of course, by digitizing, there are a number of efficiencies and cost benefits that are also brought about, right? We eliminate paper-based processes. We automate manual processes which are faster and more consistent. And, of course, we reduce administrative costs. By digitizing processes, we also look at reducing the risk of corruption, right? Everything we do on a digital platform can be traceable. It can be auditable. So those are some of the drivers that are pushing governments to digitize their services today. So there are a couple of prerequisites that we need to have in place in order for a government digitization initiative to be successful. From a governance framework point of view, we need to have a centralized authority that has the executive sponsorship and a cross-department mandate to own and run the platform. If we rely on agencies coming on board when they're ready, it's going to take forever to complete something like this. So we need to have someone who owns it. From a security and compliance perspective, we need to have a security model which has comprehensive threat detection, prevention, and response capabilities. Change management also plays a big part in this because now you're changing the way governments deliver services, so you need to train your users. You need to have support material available for citizens should they need it. And a program of this magnitude cannot be completed by an individual entity. You need to rely on vendors, you need to rely on partners, on system integrators to realize this. Given that there are so many parties that will contribute to a platform of this nature, we need to make sure that we have a thorough mechanism of evaluating, selecting, and managing these parties. Right? We need to ensure that we are extracting the value we need from these entities. Now, talking about the foundational elements that have to be in place when you start building these platforms. Firstly, you need a digital identity. A digital identity will help you authenticate and authorize your users, be it citizens or internal users, before they transact on the platform. You need to be able to identify the source of truth for every single data element that gets processed through this platform. If you take your address, for instance, today, my address is saved at the Register of People, the Electricity Board, the DMV. But which one do you update? Are they all the same? Right? To understand where you extract your data from, what data you update, we need to identify which agency owns which data element. And this has to be laid out prior to designing this platform because that dictates what gets built. You need to have an API-first approach defined. You need to have standardized APIs to share information. If you don't standardize your APIs, you're likely going to have to face issues like with API sprawl. You're going to have security problems and other management issues with that API platform. So to dig a bit deeper, what is a digital identity? It's a collection of attributes, characteristics, and credentials that help identify an individual online. Right? In this case, it'll be backed by an authoritative source because it's a government identity. The digital identity is key to enabling personalized services. It's also important to have this ID because that's what enables identity-specific or identity-aware APIs to make sure that your information is pulled up from the department you're transacting with and not someone else's. So the power of API-first design. Imagine a world where data isn't locked up in an individual department or agency, but it flows securely where it's needed. That's what an API-first approach promises. Right? It's treating APIs themselves as a product and not a byproduct of designing an interface or something like that. APIs help us break data silos. They allow information to be exchanged seamlessly between different agencies. In terms of legacy systems, APIs act as an abstraction layer, right? Having an API wrapping a legacy system buys you time to upgrade your legacy platform while still catering to a modern world. It enables services. A lot of services require agencies to communicate with, next slide please, communicate with each other. And all of that happens through APIs. From an innovation perspective, APIs allow external parties to consume the data and come up and build the experiences that you and I as citizens expect from our government. Can we skip to 2 more slides, please? 1 more. Yep, thanks. So here I've come up with a sample hub and spoke architecture, which will help us to understand what's required to build one of these digital platforms. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can find all the departments and agencies where your data resides. The section highlighted in green is the hub. The hub is what we need to build at the initial stages of a digital platform, right? It contains your identity provider and your profile store where your digital identities will be stored, and authentication and authorization services will be provided for all other components in this landscape. The integration layer that you can see in the top right is the component that's responsible for gathering data from all these back-end agencies, manipulating the data, changing protocols, standardizing the data formats which are used to exchange information with external parties. Your API gateway is the mechanism used to expose this information to third parties. It provides you with security, with your rate limits, your quotas, and your monetization mechanisms. The front ends here could be citizen portals, it could be mobile apps, it could be chatbots, it could be applications built by external parties which consume the data that these APIs expose. The developer portal, the bottom left, is where we publish information about our APIs. The documentation which describes the data formats allows you to run tests in Sandbox and actually subscribe to APIs and account plans. That is also technically a front end, but it serves a subset of users. The key takeaway with this is that the hub doesn't store any information. The data still resides at each of the agencies. The digital identity uses pseudonyms to pull the right information from each back-end system and create these experiences that you and I require. If you split this up to the next level of detail, you can see the identity and, can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Identity and access management as a vertical that goes across all the different layers. That's the mechanism used to provide capabilities like zero trust, which allows every layer to authenticate and authorize every request it receives. The user experience layer is where you have your portals, your chatbots, your mobile applications, and anything else that's built to consume the services provided by that API layer. The API layer exposes information around the APIs that you guys, that a government would expose, documentation, testing capabilities, subscriptions, and so on. The integration layer, it consists of connectors, data services, data aggregation, mapping, and your ETL type functions. The integration layer pulls data from your back-end systems through services. The services are exposed by agencies, and again, the services layer also incorporates security to make sure that the right information flows out of those platforms. And right down the bottom, you have the domain applications, your CRMs, your HR systems, and your databases and so on, where your data resides. So this is a high-level roadmap of what one of these digital government initiatives could look like. As I mentioned earlier, the first step is to build that foundation, the hub in that hub and spoke model. You look at setting up your core infrastructure, your digital identity platform, and your API gateway. The second step would be where your data integrations start to flow through that system and your front ends get developed. It's important to define an MVP that you roll out initially, and that MVP has to address some low-hanging fruit. You need to look at use cases that will impact a large number of users, but are pretty low in terms of technical complexity. Things like renewing your registration for your vehicle. Right? Everyone's got to do it once a year, and the information you require resides within a single agency, so the integration doesn't become complex. It's important to make sure that you get citizens to buy in early, so use cases like this are a good option when you're kicking off an initiative. And obviously, the front ends will also be developed at that stage. Stage 3 would be when you make your developer portal available to external parties. You select certain APIs and expose them and allow the private sector to innovate, to come up with applications and experiences that help citizens interact with governments more effectively. In the meantime, the product you define in stage 2 will keep adding use cases to it. The capabilities that we make available will continue to grow. Stage 4 is when you need to start thinking about things like monetization. There's a lot of data that's going back and forth. There are a lot of use cases that this information can be useful in. Think about opening a bank account and that whole KYC process. So all of that would be an additional revenue stream for a government, and we need to start looking at monetization. There are a number of UN Sustainable Development Goals that we can help address by digitizing government platforms. Good health and well-being, that's your e-health record. Quality education, that's accessing educational content online, having your results online and verified. Decent work and economic growth, again, by providing information quickly and easily, you can make big changes to government. So if you look at some of the work that we did with the Reserve Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India serves millions of farmers, right? And a loan process was taking north of 6 months to complete. Our products were used to automate that process, and we were able to bring that time down to 4 hours. So from over 6 months to 4 hours is a significant benefit to a farmer, and we were helping millions of farmers realize these benefits by getting the cash they needed on time. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure, that goes without saying. Reduced inequalities. So by making these services available to citizens 24/7 from anywhere on any device. We try to bridge the digital divide. Sustainable cities and communities. So one of our clients in Europe, they weigh the amount of garbage that each household produces when the truck goes by picking up garbage, right? And that goes into calculating the rates that each individual needs to pay. So that's something that's been live for, I think, a couple of years, but that's how we can create sustainable cities. Peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships for these goals is pretty self-explanatory. But just to wrap up, I'd like to leave you with this quote from Tim O'Reilly, who's a Government 2.0 pioneer. He says, "Today's technology is a strategic driver not only for improving public sector efficiency, but also for making policies more effective and governments more open, transparent, innovative, participatory, and trustworthy." Sorry, there's another slide for that.